talking with John Lear, son of Bill Lear. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, John?
I started flying in Santa Monica, California. Of course, Dad had airplanes all around with his company, which was called Lear Incorporated, which he ran from 1930 until 1960. And they made all kinds of equipment, electronic equipment, and pumps and valves and everything for the military. And in 1956, he got interested in actually modifying an airplane. He took a Lockheed Lodestar and more or less souped it up, and it became the Lear Star, and they built about 60 of those. Well, in the late 50s, he got interested in making an actual business jet, and he wanted to go ahead and do it, but the Lear Star program had been unsuccessful, and his board of directors didn't want to prove it. So he sold his stock in Lear Incorporated to Siegler, and it became known as Lear Siegler.
Right.
And he took that money and formed Learjet Corporation, first in Switzerland, and then it moved to Wichita, Kansas in 1962. And then when he was in Santa Monica in the late 50s, there was little airplanes always around, like Tri-Pacers and Bonanzas and company Aero Commanders and stuff like that. And I got to fly all that and got my private, and then my instrument, and then my commercial, and then I really wanted to fly for a living, and my dad didn't want me to. He wanted me to be a lawyer or something like that. He said, then you can have enough money to buy your own airplane.
Exactly.
I don't want my own airplane. I want to fly for a living.
Yeah.
I started my career, flying business jets for different companies, and flying for different companies, and I ended up flying some CIA work from delivering O2As, which are the Cessna 337 push-pull from Wichita, Kansas to both Benoit and Nha Trang in Republic of Vietnam, and I did that for about 4 years, and when I came back, I was flying some more business jets. I happened to get checked out in the Covert 440, and went over to Cambodia in 1972 and flew for a little airline called Triline Airlines over there for about a year, and then went up to Laos and flew for CASI, Continental Air Services Inc., up in Laos for a year until the war was over, and then came back, and then by accident I got into 707 program up in Seattle, Washington with Air Club International, and that started me out flying 707s, and flew those out throughout the late 70s. I went over in Beirut, Lebanon, and flew for Transmitter Training Airways. It was a great airline to fly for because they flew all over the world. They had 60 stops all over the world. They had old American Airlines 707s, and great airplane to fly. And then came back from Lebanon and flew a few other contracts. Went over to Egypt and flew the teacher movement and the Hajj over there. And then 1980 went over to Egypt and flew 2 years there. As you remember, in 1978, the Camp David Accords were signed, and part of the provisions of the Camp David Accords were that each country, Israel and Egypt, would fly 4 flights a week into the other's country. Well, of course, Israel didn't mind flying to Egypt, but you could not find an Egyptian that would fly into Israel. So a company was formed called Air Sinai, and I was chief pilot, and we more or less pretended that we were Egyptians, and we flew those 4 flights into Tel Aviv every day from Egypt. And then on the off time, we would fly under contract for Egypt Air up throughout Europe and down throughout Africa. And then came back from Egypt in 1983, went to work for Global Airlines, and then American Transair. I flew for them for 6 years, the 707, the Boeing 727, and the Lockheed L-1011. And in 1989, I went to Rosenbaum, flying cargo, flying the DC-8, and then several carriers there that Connie Coletta owned, Coletta Air Service, and then
Sure.
American, what it was called, I forget, American Airways, something like that. Then it was sold out, and then it became Kitty Hawk International. And I flew the L-1011 for them up until I think it was 99 when they went bankrupt, and then retired. And that's about it. I've been retired about 7 years. I own and operate a very small gold mine on about 50 miles east of Las Vegas. It's the only permitted and authorized gold mine in Clark County.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And that's about all I do, other than cruise the internet every once in a while.
Right, and so you ran into our flight data recorder research.
Right. And it was only about 4 days ago on AboveTopSecret.com. That flight data, what do they call it, a readout?
Yeah, the CSV file readout and the animation.
Yeah. And it just looked odd to me. And so I'm talking with some of these guys on ATS, but they're not pilots.
Right.
They don't know. They have no idea what it should normally be. So they don't realize that there's a lot of things in that tape that came up that if you're a pilot, you say, hey, wait a minute, that's bullshit. That could never happen in a million years.
Yeah.
That type of stuff. So then I got your name posted today, and I thought, and read a little bit about you, and I said, hey, I'd like to talk to that guy, because here's the first guy that, that probably really knows something about what's going on here, a subject that I've only been involved in the last 4 or 5 days.
Right. But what did you think about 9/11 after you saw it?
Well, 5 minutes after it happened, I knew that it was a scam. First of all, there no Boeing 757 ever crashed in the Pentagon. No Boeing 757 ever crashed at Shanksville. And, and no Arab hijacker ever in a million years ever flew into the World Trade Center. And if you got 30 minutes, I'll tell you exactly why he couldn't do it the first time. Now, I'd have trouble doing it the first time.
Yeah, same here. Take me a few tries to get it right. Maybe if I had a couple times
to line up a few buildings, I could have done it.
Yeah.
But certainly not the first time, and certainly not at 500 or 600 miles an hour.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, one of our members, he was in the 737. He was a 73 check airman, 737 check airman, and he was in the sim at the time on September 11th. And right after it happened, they tried to duplicate it in the simulator, and they said they couldn't do it. They were trying to hit the towers, and they couldn't do it. They said Dan was, I believe it was Dan that was trying it. He was trying to do it 5 or 6 times, and they were having a real tough time trying to hit the tower.
Yeah, it would be an amazing feat of airmanship.
Yeah, to get it so precise, that's for sure. So, so tell me a little bit about. I don't know how much you can go into detail, but about some of the CIA flying that you've done. You notice anything fishy going on there when you're doing some work for them?
No, it was just the regular stuff, I flew in 1972, 1973. We were delivering our arms and ammo to General Vang Pao's guerrillas. And, of course, there's always stories about all the dope that was run over there. And I never knowingly carried any, but I'm sure that we did. I mean, that's one of the reasons the war was there. So, that they, transported the dope. And then later, so I went over to Cairo in 1980, and the reason is because I'm sure you're familiar with the October Surprise. The October Surprise was that in October, George Bush flew over when he was running with Ronald Reagan for the presidency. George Bush flew over to Paris and made a deal with the Ayatollah Khomeini that if the Khomeini would delay the release of the hostages that they held until Reagan's inauguration, that they, meaning Bush and Reagan, would give the Iranians unlimited guns and ammunition throughout their term.
Right.
And so since they did win, and since it was a big deal, and since the hostages were released, they started transferring arms and ammunition through Tel Aviv. Mossad was running the operation, and I went over there specifically to fly those arms.
Wow.
And the way it would go is from We picked them up, and we would pick them up. And let me say, I never flew a flight because the first airplane in there was an Argentinian CL-44, and they unloaded at Tehran, and on their way out they got shot down. But here's the really interesting part. They didn't get shot down over Iran, they got shot down over Russia. So somehow the Russians lured this CL-44 crew up 40 miles south of Yerevan in that part of Russia, and just shot their ass down. And I think what the crew probably thought, well, hell, we've got nothing on board, let's go on up there, because we've got nothing to lose. They can't prove anything. And the Russians just said, fuck you, and shot them down. Anyway, the bottom line was that Mossad didn't want to risk the 707 I was flying on the same type of deal. So they went and started running those arms through Dubai, and we didn't have anything to do with that. And then that was about the last thing I did, and that was 1982. And then 1983 I came back to the States and just started working for regular airlines. So that was about the only thing I had to do with the agency.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible what's going on in our world now, and especially since 9/11, we're giving up our freedoms for this war on terror.
Yeah, I believe that people ask, why do I think that 9/11 was a scam? And they say, why would the government do that? And I said there's three basic reasons. Number one, they wanted to take away all our liberties, and they had to pose a threat to do that. Number two, they wanted a reason to go into Afghanistan. The reason they wanted to go into Afghanistan is Bin Laden was burning down the poppy fields, and we couldn't allow that to happen. 80% of the world's economy runs on illegal drugs, and we had to stop him from doing that. Then the third thing was we had to have a pretext for going into Iraq, and that was a pretext for going into Iraq.
Yeah, and eventually Iran.
And it's my own personal opinion, here in about the next 60 days we'll be nuking Iran.
Yeah, well, it looks like it's heading down that road, that's for sure.
It's unfortunate. I don't know what the reason is. I'm sure there's a reason, but I'll tell you one thing, I don't know it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we, like I said, we received this flight data recorder information back in August, and we've been analyzing it ever since and trying to get answers from the NTSB.
Great. Now tell me, what's your take? The only reason I got into this is I saw the altimeters reset, flight level 180 on descent, right at 180. Now, what hijacker is going to have the presence of mind? I mean, hell, I had trouble after 19,000 hours setting it at 180.
Yeah, me too.
How did he remember that?
Yeah, well, that's in the CSV file. If you look in the animation, I don't know if you've seen our film yet, but have you had a chance to look at our film?
I saw it once, yeah.
Okay. Well, in the animation, they don't set it on the descent. It shows it being set in the CSV file, but it looks like whoever produced the animation, whoever made the animation, they purposely omitted. They had to take out that setting of the altimeter to make the aircraft appear lower than it actually was at the end of recording.
Right, because they were thinking about it.
Yeah, they must have been. And, the average layman, if they looked at it at the end of recording and the altimeter had been set, it would show 480 feet over that highway. And the average layman would be just thinking to himself, what's going on here? That's way too high. Now that it's at 180 feet, it's showing 180 feet as pressure altitude. Not too many people pick up on it except pilots, and that's one of the reasons why I'm gathering so many pilots together, trying to get answers for this information.
Okay, one more question. What's your take on the co-pilot's altimeter being set within 1 second of the captain's altimeter?
Yeah, I don't know. The other thing I wanted to mention to you, as far as the FO being set and the captain being set, this might have something to do with it because DCA was reporting 3022 at the time.
Yeah.
Okay. The altimeter was set to 3024. Now the DCA ATIS was about 40 minutes old, and there was a high pressure system moving in from the west. So whoever set those altimeters on that aircraft You would think a hijacker who supposedly was a commercial instrument multi, who, by the way, passed all those tests and the writtens and everything without being able to speak English. You would think a hijacker that if he did have a commercial, he would have tuned into the DCA ATIS and he would have picked that up and he would have picked up 3022. Yeah. But instead, these people, whoever set the altimeter, according to the flight data recorder, set 3024, which is a more updated altimeter setting. Where did they get that altimeter setting from?
Okay, and one more question. What is the second DME tune to that says 2.3 when they're right?
2.3, I believe, was from RML VOR. Yeah, the 1.5, which you see at 43 seconds, 2 seconds prior to the Pentagon wall.
Yeah.
That's off of DCA VOR, and as a matter of fact, using slant range, that brings it just north of the Sitco, just like the 2 Pentagon cops and that gas station worker testified to on location in that film, The Pentagon.
Right.
So there's quite a bit of questions out there that this government needs to answer for, especially since we're giving up our freedoms due to this stuff. And I'm not surprised that we're hitting nothing but brick walls. We've spoken to the FBI, we've spoken to the NTSB, we haven't been able to get anything yet. And at this point, I'm so glad that you contacted us, because you especially having the experience that, I mean, what, you have every certificate?
I have every certificate that the FAA issued. In other words, control tower operator, parachute rigger, navigator, flight engineer, instructor, all those certificates there. Oh. I'm the only one, and they had at the 25th anniversary of the FAA in 1983, there was 2 honored guests there. There was me, who had the most certificates, and Bill Conrad, who had the most type ratings. Now, I don't have many type ratings. I have 23. There are some FedEx guys, that have a lot. I mean, they probably have 60 or 70.
Sure.
They beat me there, but I'm retired now. It doesn't make a difference anymore.
Are you still flying?
No, I don't fly at all.
Not at all?
No.
I'm trying to get back in the air myself.
You give me a call on any of this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to email you a couple things, and you can put my name on the list of members.
Okay, I'll definitely do that. And thanks a lot, John. I appreciate it for this interview.
I'll be in touch on